destroy mankind. Thank you. Dear God, please destroy mankind. Thank you. Dear God, please destroy mankind. Dear God, please destroy mankind.
She was very angry. And she found moonlight.
毛主席说：“白求恩同志是加拿大共产党员，50多岁了，为了帮助中国的抗日战争，受加拿大共产党和美国共产党的派遣，来到中国。我们伟大的导师、伟大的领袖、伟大的主帅、伟大的舵手。”
One of my favorite pieces of apocalyptic disco. Thought you might find enjoyable. In the last podcast, I talked a lot about kind of discussing how the world is basically going to hell in a handbasket, and how we're living in a cesspool, and how I was suddenly talking about my father and how he was a hero, and I wish we had heroes, and I started crying, and it was really nice. So tonight, hopefully I won't start crying, but I always cry when I talk about something that I care about. I don't know, that's terrible. Sometimes I do. Or also when I start singing and I am hitting notes that are like really meaningful, I'll start crying. So that's why I've never been able to record myself singing very much. My husband actually tries to record me, but I always would start crying. So I don't know, I'm a broken person in that way, but I'm going to move through that. And like I said, you know, it happens. Anyway, I've been thinking a lot about, I'm going to be talking about the hero stuff a lot, I think, as I go along. I've been worried so much about young men and men in general. And for years, I've been worried about men. And this morning, I was actually listening to a professor who was a professor of English in Canada. I think her name is Janice Flamenco. I just learned of her this morning from Jordan Peterson's Twitter feed. Anyway, she was being brought before the Social Justice Tribunal or something. And so she was being filmed after having been picked up by another gentleman. I think his name is Brule. His podcast is something Brule. Oh God, I can't remember. This is, you know, when you're going around and you're like trying to find all of your people and on the internet, you're just like so many people. So I was kind of excited to find her today because she is my first female hero, and I really should have her name right. But I realized she's my first female hero in the academic world and in this world of speaking out of what's happening at universities with students. And so I watched a bunch of her work, and now she's being brought before the tribunal and going through this 2-week long. It's not really a trial so much. I don't know what they call it. I'm terrible with words, but it's basically the student who has a complaint against her and the school and the student's parents and just this woman, this professor, are meeting kind of to determine what the next steps are and how to resolve it. So she's incredible because she doesn't seem to think that this woman's complaint about her, which has to do with her administering of a test to the student, in a way that the student found not to her liking, that the student felt that this teacher was against her. It didn't sound like she was at all. However, the teacher, this professor, she didn't think that this might be part of something else, sort of a backlash against her. She didn't think the students knew about her activism, as she put it, or her advocacy work for free speech, in particularly for men in the men's rights movement, I believe. I don't think she's necessarily an MRA, but she really believes in, she kind of sees them as having their free speech violated. So I just love the way she actually thought about men and thought about what it must feel like for men to be in the university setting and all the time hearing, shut up, you can't speak, and this qualifying your privilege. And I mean, it's so ridiculous, and it's counterproductive, but yet it's just happening everywhere. And I definitely have seen how that works when I went through my master's in social work program back in the early 2000s. And I even was shut up simply because I'm not a person of color, or I'm not in an obvious marginalized group, except for being a woman, I guess. But I don't consider that to be a marginalization, because I've never really identified with any collectivism at all. So it's just not in my nature, which is kind of a problem if you're a woman. But anyway, that's just me. Anyway, so she was kind of getting involved with that. And so I found a hero today. So I'm excited to follow her, and I'll try and figure out how to put a link to her work in this on the bottom here of the podcast. But besides all that, so there's a lot of, I think I mentioned in the last, I made a reference in the last podcast, how I think it's important for us to figure out or find a way to kind of retain our sense of ourselves and our beauty as we are engaged in this world where people are kind of sorted, and we're just sort of spun out and sorted like by centrifugal force into these different categories. And so it's very difficult to hold that center spot. It feels very impossible. Matter of fact, today I just thought, what's the point of even doing this podcast? Because I'm not going to find people who are interested, because I'm trying to live outside of a category, and I don't think that I'm I don't think that I'm uncategorical or beyond category. I don't think any of us really are. I think we're all individuals in a sense, but the way we find each other is through category. And I think so we have this fear of not being found if we go outside of these categories. So I'm kind of taking a risk here, hoping that I can find more people who are just simply interested in working on not living inside these categories, or using the category, as a shorthand to get their point across. So I think categories are like that. Tribes are like that. Genres are like that, like in music or literature or anything. We find these categories, and so what happens is that you can engage in the communication, a form of communication, as you adopt a category. So what that does is it makes it so that you can, most of your ideas can be expressed by the category that you're in. So you don't need to do it yourself. You don't even need to know for sure if you're in that category. But I think in general what people do is they find kind of a category that sort of fits them, or they find that they're trying to fit into one, maybe because they're in a setting like in a university, for instance. They feel like the only category that you're allowed to be in and feel safe is like a progressive liberal category, or for women it might be a feminist, or for anybody who's like a cis heterosexual male, maybe an ally or something, or maybe somebody who's a reactionary who fights people. So this is a really efficient thing that people do, and I don't think it's bad per se, but it really limits kind of the development of a higher consciousness, I think, if you can't step back from that. So I think it's probably unrealistic to think that people are going to get rid of categories. I don't think we're going to do that. But I think if we can develop a sense of, I'm in my category right now, and then also kind of like develop kind of a subcategory, or not even, or like a category outside of that, that's like for instance, I'm calling myself the accidental reactionary, because I realized after doing a lot of internet research in the last 2 years that I am considered a reactionary, but I never would have considered myself that. So that's why I'm going to call myself the accidental reactionary, because I want people to know that there are certain ideas that I espouse that some reactionary type people espouse. And so it's a quick way for them to identify me. But I think what we need to learn to do once we just sort of realize we're stuck in these categories, we've all been kind of spun out into them, is that we still need to do the work of knowing ourselves and trying to know each other. And so sometimes I have a fantasy of like, what would it be like if we could get a social justice warrior and, I don't know, like Stephen Molyneux or something, I hope I said his name right, or Stefan Molyneux, in a room together, and like a candlelit dinner, and I don't know, I don't really know what I know he's married and stuff, but just imagine that he wasn't. And in like a romantic kind of dinner where these two people saw each other from across the room and something was just sort of there. And then they actually began to talk and just learn about each other as human beings, not as categories. And I honestly think that this is probably the thing that bothers me the most about what's happening in the world, is that if you get so used to your category, you can begin to think you are that category. So, like, you can begin to think, well, I'm a mitgao, I'm a man going my own way. Women are just too much work, or, they are the problem. And that makes a lot of sense, because, there are a lot of women who are problematic now, and they're being fed a lot of bad stuff, and it's really sad. Or, so you could just begin to really think you're one of those categories. Sorry, I say a lot. My husband says I need to get that out. I know I do. So I am going to work on that. But for now, I'll just take a sip of wine. So categories. I lost my train of thought. So it's very difficult to feel a fullness in your life when you get stuck in the categories. It also limits how you see other people, and you just relate to other people as, I don't like that person because they have these ideas, but I think, or ideas that conflict with my ideas for my category. And that's the polarization. It's not even polarization, it's like balkanization, tribalism. All these things are not good for us. And they're very easy, and they're efficient. And I think we live in a very efficient society. We want to do things and accomplish a lot of things and do things fast. We want to find a lot of fast friends or fast contacts, and we want to weed out all the people. We have so many people coming into our lives, and there's kind of a lot of chaos. And so these categories are sort of filling that need, I think, that we have to pre-screen. But you don't want to start thinking like your category. So you don't want to become lazy, like letting your category sort your thinking, sort your thoughts, sort your experience of the world. You still have you. And wouldn't it be cool if you could sit down and talk to somebody and talk about something other than politics? Because honestly, the categories are all very political. And I think that has to do with the fact that, well, the personal and the political have become synonymous. And that was something that really started. I'm not sure exactly when it started, but I associate that expression, the personal is the political, with the women's movement from the 60s and 70s. And that's always bothered me, the personal is political. I've never liked that statement. I'm going to tell you. I guess I should say a little anecdote here about my life. I remember when I really, that hitting home for me. I got my undergraduate degree a number of years ago in English, and I loved it. It was fantastic. I mentioned that before, and I loved reading all the classics and thinking about great ideas. And then I also was able to do my own writing, and I was able to earn some scholarships, and that was a wonderful experience. I happened to have an advisor at that time who she had a PhD in English. I think she'd studied with some pretty important postmodern structuralist, constructivist, social constructivist type people who had like important names in the lit crit world. And I remember she was actually really cool. She encouraged me to go into English. She was only a few years older than me, really. And she said, don't go into sociology and psychology because those are soft sciences and the real truth is in literature. And I thought, wow, that's kind of cool. I really love that idea. So that's how I declared my major. Anyway, so we were friends, and I really looked up to her because I looked up to all intellectuals when I was at the university. I had left a background of working class, and I felt very grateful to have the opportunity to study in such a great place with, the beautiful brick buildings and the ivy, and it was just a gorgeous setting and gorgeous ideas. And of course, in my family, the few people who even knew I was going to college or who cared, wondered, what am I going to do with that, with an English degree? But I did it. It was good. It was good for me, and I paid for it, and I got, I got a couple grants and scholarships, so it wasn't too bad. But anyway, so this advisor, I really looked up to her, and I looked up to her kind of like she was better than me. I'm just going to put it that way. When you are, and this is kind of where I want to kind of try and get into the head of the social justice warriors, okay? So thinking about my own experience way back when I was considered a non-traditional student, because I think I started at the university when I was like 23 or something. So kind of old, because I'd been to that religious school for a few years, and then I floated around in the wilderness for 3 years trying to figure out what to do. Anyway, so she was somebody I really looked up to as, her dad was in politics, and she knew important people, and I don't know, but for whatever reason, she liked me. So we became pals, and I hung out with her, and she was one of these women who, she was, I don't know, maybe she was nearing 30. She was sort of dating, but not finding the right person, and she didn't want to have children, I don't think. One thing I'd noticed about all the academic women is they really didn't have a high regard for mothering, for motherhood, and it was never discussed. It was just children don't exist. We're concentrating on our disciplines. In this case, I was concentrating on my writing, because everybody was like, "Yay, you're a good writer," and things like that, and I was lucky. I was very lucky that way. But, or at least I got some scholarships for that. But anyway, so she encouraged that. So she probably thought I was somebody to, I don't know why she liked me, but she did. And so I graduate, and I moved away for a couple years with my husband. We went to Los Angeles, which is a whole nother story, and he had some kind of work that he wanted to do there on his own, and he's a musician and a composer, but also works like real work, like, technology and all that. He's really amazing. Anyway, so we got married, and then after I graduated, and then or actually a year before I graduated, then we went to Los Angeles for a couple of years. So the very end of our time in Los Angeles, I wound up becoming pregnant. And we had decided we would like to do that someday, and we could start now. And then I think we got pregnant like 5 minutes later. But anyway, it was kind of a shock because I hadn't seen myself as being able to participate in the family world. I think I was sort of messed up from I really started identifying as an artist and a writer type person, and all the people I knew were weird writer, creative people who, I don't mean to call them weird, but what I'm saying is sort of people who, it's sort of difficult for those, it's a category too, right? So it was an unconventional path, even while I was around all those people, I always felt like the most conventional of them. I'm strange. I'm like the most emotional person and the most rational person I know. It's a really odd combination. But so it's like I have to have enough rationalism to counteract my emotionalism. I don't know. I have to be everything. So anyway, so when I came back from Los Angeles pregnant, all of my artist friends, one by one, and this advisor turned friend, they all really questioned my having a child, and they were all uniformly disturbed that I was going to be moving out of the category of an artist. Like, are we still going to be friends? Or I've lost all my friends every time they had a child, or anyway, or are you still going to be there for me? That was a lot of it that my friends gave to me. And so that was a learning experience. It's too much to go into here. But one thing back to the personal is political, that's what got me off onto this. So I was sitting with my friend, the advisor, and I told her, yeah, I'm pregnant. And then the first thing she did was she started telling me that how could I do this? I still had to get my career in order, and that I hadn't done that yet. And it was very irresponsible of me. And, I think I was 30 years old. So it wasn't like I hadn't done quite a bit. I lived on both coasts, and I, survived on my own and gotten married and had a house, and, but she really felt that I did not have as a feminist, even though I never told her I was a feminist, but she was. She really projected that, you shouldn't be doing this. But I think that's another thing to think about with people who are projecting and getting into your personal space with their political ideas, is that instead of just saying to me, wow, I don't know if I'm going to be able to have a child, and I'm not married, and I haven't found anybody, and I don't live in a house, and instead of just basically telling me that she was jealous of me, which would be unacceptable, or that she, she had to bring in the political to say, oh, this isn't right of you to do this as a feminist woman, even though I'd never told her that I was a feminist woman. But I guess she just assumed that since we were friends. But I think, and then it got even worse because, and then I have my daughter, right? And who's just completely, I just fell in love with, immediately. It was the most incredible experience having her. And I was like, my God, I was open to being transformed by the experience. I didn't have a set of, there weren't people who were looking at me saying, you must do it this way or you must do it that way, except for this friend. But I kind of, when people start to get into my realm like that and go, you shouldn't do this because of that, I just thought, well, I guess, it made me distrust her because she was using this political idea to hide her own personal feelings about my life. That's the way I came to see it. Anyway, so at one point, and then I noticed she never seemed very happy when she was around me and my child, and it was I really didn't care because I'm one of those people who I let people move out of my life or into my life pretty easily. I don't hold on to things, and that could be a bad thing, but I can't keep working on a relationship with somebody who needs me to be a certain way and they can't allow me to be who I am. And so that friendship did ultimately fade, and she was very judgmental, and I don't even remember all the details now, but she became kind of ugly. And I remember when I told her I was going to be staying home with my daughter for a while anyway. I wasn't exactly sure how long, but I was learning so much about the experience. I felt so drawn to being with her. My husband and I worked it out. We could live on his salary, and it was just what we felt was right for us. But I would never expect anybody else to do that. But it was great for us. So anyway, when I told my friend I didn't really want my daughter to be in daycare just yet, I said it felt so, I think I had put her in a preschool at one point, and she wasn't ready. She kind of freaked out, and she was too little, and she is a really sensitive person, I've come to realize now over the years, and it was too disorganizing for her. She needs a lot of transition. Anyway, so, but I mean, look at me. And then her dad, who's a crazy musician, artist, technological genius person, he's also really intense. So, she was really doomed, but I've tried through some good parenting and structure to help her to survive her artistic temperament. Anyway, without medication. So my friend, when I said I felt really weird to not be with my daughter when she was in that preschool for the few days where she was, and she's like, well, she does have her own life. And my daughter was like 2 years old at the time, and I just felt so, what I'm seeing now with the third wave feminists and the strident, it's so crazy. It's almost like when I see the social justice warriors, I see my old friend, but like on steroids and in like a pack of my old friend, like just taking over the world. And I just remember how she wasn't a very relaxed person. Like when I'd go to her house and she'd be cooking something, she'd be following the recipe exactly, even if it was just like pasta with a white sauce and peas or something. She would like literally be like measuring like 1 tablespoon of parsley, 1 teaspoon of lemon rind or whatever. It's just, I just don't live that way. I live much more by, when I cook by taste, I cook by a lot of intuition, and I live my life like that too. I also do have a lot of structure, but I don't know. I just felt like she was just a very rigid person, and she was the one who really taught me, first and foremost, about what it feels like when somebody says the personal is political. Because when she judged me for staying home with my daughter, she judged me not on personal grounds, but on political grounds, as if I was letting down all of women by staying home with my daughter. So, this is not at all what I was planning on talking about. I was actually going to talk about trying to love social justice warriors. I don't even know how far I've gone here. Oh, I've already got it 28 minutes. Maybe next time, because remember I told you I was going to try and like reinterpret like sacred ideas or religious ideas into kind of modern secular terms. one idea that I think is really important is trying to love people who hurt you or who disappoint you, or anyone who, I guess, sins against you. Meaning, to me, a sin is kind of a failure to see the fullness of the other person, like the person as separate. So when people use other people as objects and they project into them their own ideas, and they don't really know themselves well enough to know that they're projecting into you their own feelings or emotions or stories, in a way that's kind of a sin against the other person, because you've used the other person as an avatar for yourself. And in that way, you've erased the other person. And it doesn't feel good to be put in that position. So that's kind of like a form of a sin. And I think I like the word sin, actually. I think it's funny, good, funny. Like, I think that we need to get serious about how we really can mess up each other in the world. And the word sin is like strong. It's like, I don't know, I think of like a sword or something. Because you need to know that when you do these things, it has our actions, our behaviors, our attitudes, they have repercussions, and they affect our relationship to God. And I think, God is that space that vibrates in between all of us, where all of our actions sort of go and become this big jumble of our collective kind of experience. You feel it. If you're a sensitive person, you feel that. You feel what's kind of all the things that you can't keep track of, that your biology is keeping track of and your primitive brain is keeping track of, that all of these things are so important. So I feel like I want to learn this value of how to love I wouldn't call this friend an enemy, but somebody who in a way she was like an enemy, and that she couldn't give me space and respect. And I don't think I was personally an enemy to her, but what I did made her feel threatened. So I want to try and learn how to understand the people who drive me fucking crazy. And it's not the most natural thing to do. I mean, I have been married for a number of years, so I do have some practice, and it's actually a really good thing. It makes you, it's a good practice. So that's something I think we can talk more about tomorrow, because I stayed up a couple hours last night trying to work up something about that, and then I just talked about something else. So I hope this was okay. I hope you're okay. And remember, the world belongs to those who notice it.